pretty chilly day today. It snowed last night, and now the snow's off the ground here, but I can see up in the mountains, the snow has gone all the way down through the foothills and to the valley. It's still up there. This next story is about some trappers who were exploring the area and around Nephi. We're going to call this story Sugarloaf Peak. During their exploration of the area around there, they found there was an Indian village there, and they wanted to avoid that village at all costs because they didn't know if they were hostile or friendly. And I think they successfully did that. And then on the way back to their camp, they ran into a bunch of Indians doing probably some hunting or something, and I imagine both parties were pretty surprised at it. But in their attempt to escape, one of the Indians shot one of the trappers in the back with an arrow, and so the trappers were trying to get as much distance as they could between them. And they happened to notice in their means of escape, there's a badger that came out of this hole, and it was big enough so they could fit in. So they jumped off their horses and slapped their horses, and they continued on. And the three of them, they jumped into this badger hole. What they found in that badger hole is pretty amazing. And so I'll let the story continue on so you can hear what they found in there, and why we have this story in the first place. So have fun. So this next video is on, what's it called again?
It's known to the majority as the Sugarloaf Gold story.
Okay, because we're recording now.
And it's in Dale Bascom's book. And I think me and Terry Carter did a interview on it once. I know I've written an article on it.
What do you find about it fascinating?
Well, it's a storybook tale, okay? And I generally just don't really want anything to do with a storybook tale unless there's something about it that catches my attention. And what happened was, a friend of mine, I could probably mention his name, but I'm not gonna. He called me up one day and he says, "Hey, have you ever read the Sugarloaf Gold story?"
In Dale Bascom's book?
What's that?
The one in Dale Bascom's book, or a different version?
Yeah. And I said, well, it wasn't in Dale's book at the time.
Okay, so it was a different version.
Because Dale's book came out after that. But I told him, yeah, I've read it. I just don't remember it. And go to the next one. And right here. And I says, why Why? And he says, you need to go read it again. And I said, okay. What are you thinking? He says, I just want to see something.
Right.
I said, all right.
You want to do a blind evaluation from you?
Yeah. And so I went and read the story again and picked up on a few things that I didn't notice the first time. And called him up. I said, well, I read it. And he says, what'd you find out? What'd you think? And I says, they're in the wrong place. He says, how did I know you were going to say that? And I says, what's more? I says, how about we get together and we'll take a drive. I'm going to show you where they went and where it's actually at.
So just by reading the story, you were able to pinpoint in your head exactly where they'd be at?
Not pinpoint, but it got me in the right area. I later found out that the Sugarloaf Peak that I thought it was not the peak.
Oh.
It was up above it. But it's a perspective thing. And I didn't notice it until I'd gone back and read the story again, and then I realized it couldn't be the first peak that I had picked out. It couldn't be. Because they would have been able to see it from way over there.
Right.
Or where they were. But anyway, so I went and picked him up, and we went for a drive, and I drove him up the canyon that I'm positive that they went up. There's a few phrases in the document that, depending on your perspective, you're gonna take it a little differently than the next guy. Okay.
Okay. So, right now we've talked about it, but we haven't talked the story about what it is for the viewers.
You're very perceptive.
Okay.
So basically, you want me to shut up and tell the story.
And then go back to where you picked up going up the canyon.
Of course. Well, by all means, go read the story. It's in Dale Bascom's book. But my suggestion is don't pay attention to all the crap that was written about it by third and fourth hand parties. The story itself, I guarantee, is a third hand story. That's what kind of made it undesirable at first. Because I like original information.
That's true.
Unfortunately, it's the best we got. So you want to just pay attention to what... now I forgot his name. This is your fault,
I interrupted you.
The guy who showed up in town that day. How could I forget that?
We'll clip it out. It'll only take about this fast, then you'll remember it.
I know it has something to do with age.
Memory loss.
Do I have to look it up? It's not important, but it sure helps the story flow. Godfrey. Hang on. My hell, am I going to tell the story without telling that part? Apparently.
You're cracking me up, man.
See, the article, there's also an article in Toscoro.com that you can read that gives a lot more information.
What's the title of that?
The title of that article is Piles of Gold Bricks and the Trappers, and it was written July 20th, 2019.
Okay.
But Johnny Rasmussen. See, I didn't see it. I still haven't seen it, but it came to me.
Johnny Rasmussen.
A guy by the name of Johnny Rasmussen shows up in Springville or Spanish Fork, I can't remember which. And he's carrying a map with him. And he's asking around and trying to find directions, asking questions about a Sugarloaf Peak and cedar trees and red ledges and whatever. Somehow the story gets over to Bishop Coyle and Ben Bullock. The Dream Mine, and then the other one, I can't remember what it's called, the Relief Mine. And they get to talking to this guy, and they hear his story, and, oh, this is the place you're looking for right here, and, see that mountain right there is the Sugarloaf Peak. And apparently he wasn't listening to the story, because it's not a mountain, it's at the base of a mountain.
Do you think they were doing it on purpose?
No, I think they actually thought that
that's it.
The story they were working on was the Sugarloaf Gold story.
Okay.
But anyway, they had this guy so screwed up, he eventually just packed up and left. Went back to Mexico.
Sounds like they could have done it on purpose.
With his very English name, Johnny Rasmussen.
Wow.
Or should I say Nordic, Rasmus' son.
Right. Yeah.
How'd you like a dad named Rasmus?
They had to be with the Rasmus trade.
Anyway, the short of it is the story that there was a trapping party that came into the area of the Great Salt Lake sometime back in about 1827, which is when this happened.
Okay.
And they met at a camp that they claim was out by Grantsville. My guess would be it was probably somewhere around Magna, but that don't matter. Three guys set out on their own. All the trappers separated and went to different areas, and these three trappers, they went south. They was going to follow this river that was flowing into the Great Salt Lake. Keep in mind, 1827. They went up and over the point of the mountain, and they were absolutely amazed at this beautiful, crystal clear blue lake that was sitting in front of them. Utah Lake, yeah.
Okay.
Before it had 40 years worth of sewer dumped in it.
Okay.
And that should add to the story. There's a place in the document where it says they followed the canyon they followed it as far as the canyons fed. And how these guys got the idea that meant they didn't go past the mouth of the canyon. Okay?
All right.
So everybody has the location of this Sugarloaf Gold story by Spring Lake.
Because that's where...
And, well, it has to do with because it was according to them, the last river or creek that came to Utah Lake, and it's not. There's one more. There's a lot of different reasons why they put it there, okay? Ben Bullock and Bishop Coyle had a lot to do with it. And that's why the story went down in recent history as being up in Spring Lake. Let's go back to my buddy whom I went and picked up, and I drove him down to, I got to remember what that canyon's called. Starts with a G. It's just west of Salem, Utah. And it goes up through the canyon and comes out at Mona Reservoir. Okay, keep in mind, Mona Reservoir wasn't there in 1827.
Right.
But that's the canyon that they followed. And the reason I'm saying they followed that canyon, followed the waters, they were trappers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go to the mouth of the canyon, find a beaver dam, and say, oh, well, okay,
we're done,
and then forget it and walk away. They're going to go to where the water comes from, the springs. And so they went Goshen Canyon. So they went up Goshen Canyon, and they came out very close to where Mona Reservoir is. And I guarantee you they could see across the valley and see a Sugarloaf Peak that is on the base of the mountain. Keep in mind, you got foothills, and then you have the base of the mountain, then you have the mountain.
Right.
Well, the Sugarloaf Peak that I thought it was, you can't see it from over there. In fact, you can't see it until you get to the Nephi exit. And it has a big J on it. Can't miss it. I thought that was the peak for a long time.
That was
and so I drove him over there and I showed it to him, and I think I left him a little bit amazed. And I showed him where I think the red ledges are, and it very well could have fit. But I got back into reading the story again, and I realized there's no way this could be the peak, because they couldn't see it from over there.
From where they're trapping.
Well, the trappers, when they came out of that canyon, they saw an Indian wickie up, way up ahead of them, a village, an Indian village, and they didn't know whether these Indians were going to be hostile or not, so they skirted to the north, up into the foothills,
and
went around it. Well, I found out from some actually I got it from the landowner, but the archaeologist verified it for me, where that village was. And sure enough, just past that village, there's a Sugarloaf Peak. But you can see the tip of that peak fairly good from way over where you come out of Goshen Canyon, if you know what you're looking for.
Okay.
The reason that's important is because these are the things that they remembered after their little experience.
So they could get back to it.
Yes. Now, after that, after skirting to the north, and they're making their way towards Salt Creek, you know where Salt Creek Canyon is. It goes up out of Nephi and over to Moroni and such. And some Indians were coming down out of Salt Creek.
They spotted them.
And they started firing arrows at them. So they beat feet out of there on their horses, of course. One of them took an arrow in the back. There's never any mention of whether the Indians were on foot or whether they were on horseback. So we just don't know. But they went higher up into the foothills, and I can't remember what it says after that, but they passed a hole in the ground. They saw a badger come out of a hole that was about the size, big enough for a man to get in.
Right.
And so they jumped off their horses. Apparently they couldn't see the Indians behind them. And they slapped the horses on the butt, and the horses took off, and they dragged their buddy into the hole, and they waited in there for 3 days. While they were in there, their buddy died. Before their buddy died, they had made some makeshift torches because they could tell this wasn't just a badger hole. It was a cave system or a mine. And so they made some torches, and they started exploring the tunnels, and they came across a stack of bricks, gold bricks on the floor. They never mentioned anything about markings on them or anything like that. They just referred to them as bricks. Well, they went back to tell their buddy the good news, and that's when they discovered he had died. They dragged his body back to those bricks and built a little sepulcher over the top of him to keep the animals from ravaging his body. And
they used the gold bricks to do that?
Yes.
Wow.
And they had planned on coming back to get them. They knew they couldn't take them with them. They decided after 3 days to leave in the middle of the night, which they did, made their way around the Indians and headed back up towards Salt Lake area. They decided it was in their best interest not to mention anything about the gold that they had found, and that they would document it and write about it as soon as they got back to pencil and pen or whatever, paper and pen. How many years went by, I don't know, but it was that trapper's grandson was Johnny Rasmussen, who came back looking for it based on his grandfather's information. Well, I was talking to Daryl about this story, and you know Daryl, he's a thinker, and he goes in and the first thing he wants to know is, was there any expeditions, trapping expeditions into this area that year? Sure enough, he found one. He even found a list of the names of the people who joined that expedition. There was the Provost Party and the Ogden Party.
Okay.
The Provo Party mentioned a skirmish with the Indians. Now, whether this is what happened to those 3 guys, I don't know.
Right.
But they suppose that it happened somewhere around the Jordan River or the Provo River.
Okay.
And I think it may be evidence of what actually happened, but nobody really knew what happened
Because it just said skirmish.
because they didn't tell them about it,
Because
or they didn't give them the details.
Right.
They didn't
Probably.
want them to know where it happened. But anyway, the point being is there was an expedition there in 1827. And we had a list of names, but none of them matched up with Rasmussen. But there was an expedition.
Right.
So we thought that was kind of cool. I don't know what more I can tell about it, but it's very much like the instructions say. It says that at the base of the mountain there's a Sugarloaf Peak. There absolutely is. They said that roughly 3/4 of a mile past, there's some red ledges. I would say it's more like 1.25 miles. So, in my opinion, it's off by about 1/2 mile, but I know it's the right spot. You just have to see everything to get what I'm saying.
Right.
But unfortunately, when we got over there and started looking for badger holes, guess what?
You had a lot of badger holes to find.
We had a ton of badger holes.
Well, I actually had a badger hole still.
And there's a lot of scrub oak that's grown over the hills. And
So it's almost impossible to find it.
yeah, how many badger holes are underneath those bushes?
And how many of those bushes have rattlesnakes and stuff in them?
Yeah, and according to the original story, the badger hole that they went in was below the red ledges. Unfortunately, the red ledges is this big natural, I don't know what kind of formation you'd call it, but it's like a red conglomerate that sticks out of the ground. And if you go up and take a close look at those red ledges, there's been mining operations going on there where they have built fires up against it and thrown water on it to crack the stones open. Another friend of mine took some of them stones home and ran a few tests on them.
Essayed?
And there's gold.
Wow.
I don't know how much, but there is gold.
So that'd be the source of probably where the bricks came from.
Maybe.
Maybe.
My guess would be down at the bottom of that formation. Because if you've got your conglomerate, that's your river bottoms. You want to be under that. But
It's a cool story.
I've pretty much given up on it because it's a pretty good size area.
Yeah.
And there's an awful lot of badger holes. And we don't know how many of them's under the bushes. And
It might be a reason to take that big old huge metal detector out there, penetrate it down.
you know, you make it sound like this thing that's,
We
the
just walk
size
down the
of a
street and
swimming
find it.
pool.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm just saying. Yeah, it's like you said earlier. It's people go out and they look at this big, huge, vast area and they just give up before they even start.
well, this is one that I kind of fit that mold because when I got up there and I saw how many badger holes there were and all the scrub oak that's growing around there, and it's like, how in the hell are we ever going to find it? That's a lot of badger holes, and how many of them are under the bushes? What do you do? You just keep hoping that there's going to be some great technology that comes up and that actually works.
Something.
So there you have it. And if you want to get the story without everything that I have forgotten and did not put into this verbal story, go read the article on Tuscoro.com.
Or they can actually email you as well at Discaro.
Yeah, I think me and Terry Carter did a video on it, but it's not going to be any different than this.
Right.
Just you got to read the actual article.
Well, just getting it out there as often as possible. Maybe more people would see it. I guess maybe.
And this is one I don't have a problem in going with somebody, show them the basic layout, show them why I think it's there. And, and if they come up with a different idea, okay, but I'm sticking to my story.
Okay. Thanks, Tim.
I can't do that.
Oh, that's right.
Remember, I screwed up that shoulder.
Thanks
So
for all your
now I
time.
have 2 screwed up shoulders. This one's been repairing itself now for 6 years, and it's still not back. So now I got another one.
Well, I'll put this out, and then anybody has any questions,
We're still recording now.
Yeah, you can email Dan at discoro@gmail.com, right?
Yes.
Or you go to his blog, and you can probably post on the blog, or actually, I don't know how you do it there. They could read about it at least there.
I'm going to be picky about who I send these to, and forgive me for being so, but I've seen enough Heart Rocks. I've seen enough Royal Poodles. I've seen enough
Faces in the rocks.
Faces in the rocks and shadows, and even cedar trees that are shaped like a bunny. Okay, I just don't want to see any more of it. So please keep that to yourself.
Anyway, so cool. Take it easy. Have fun.